World War III starts tomorrow. Russia's first 72 hours, 3:14 a.m. Moscow time. A duty officer in an underground command bunker reads a line of text off a secure terminal, then reads it again, as if rereading it might change what it says. It doesn't. He picks up a phone that has not been used for its intended purpose in over 60 years. This is not a history lesson. This is not a war that already happened. This is the war that could start tomorrow. Seen from the other side of the map, most Americans never think to look at. It doesn't begin with a missile. It never does. It begins with something almost administrative. A border skirmish reclassified overnight from incident to active aggression. A satellite constellation blinks out over Eastern Europe, and no one can agree, publicly, on what. State television, usually predictable to the point of parody, goes silent for 4 hours and returns with a different anchor, a different tone, a different kind of certainty. Within a day, conscription notices begin arriving in provincial towns that have sent sons to every conflict for 2 centuries and quietly hoped this era might finally spare them. Within 2 days, the words special measures are replaced, for the first time in decades, with a plainer, older word, war, a word the state has avoided as carefully as a curse. The capital does not erupt, it tightens. Traffic on the ring roads changes rhythm, more official convoys, fewer ordinary commuters willing to be out after dark. Currency exchange kiosks post numbers that update every hour instead of every day. Grandmothers who lived through Leningrad's siege stories passed down rather than remembered tell their grandchildren to fill the bathtub with water, just in case, the way their own grandmothers once told them. Inside the Kremlin's inner offices, the mood is not the chaos outsiders imagine. It is colder than that, a controlled, procedural grimness. Men who have spent entire careers rehearsing for exactly this contingency now discover the exercise has become the event. Emergency sessions run back to back. Regional governors are summoned, briefed, and sent home with instructions they are told not to write down. A televised address is scheduled for the following evening, and every domestic network is ordered to carry it. A rare synchronized unity in a media landscape more accustomed to managed dissent than managed consensus. The address itself is brief. Careful, it does not promise a quick victory, because promising a quick victory to a population that remembers how the last quick war unfolded would be its own kind of danger. It speaks instead of necessity, of encirclement, of a civilization defending its right to exist on its own terms. The phrase, "The West has left us no choice," appears twice. The phrase, "This will demand sacrifice," appears once, and it lands the heaviest. Behind closed doors, it is messier. There are disputes over how many reservists to call, over whether to shutter borders entirely or allow a controlled trickle of exits, over how much of the truth the public can absorb before panic outpaces control. Every decision made in these first hours will outlive the men making them, and everyone in the room understands this, even if no one says it aloud. At garrisons stretching from the western military districts to bases along the Pacific coast, floodlights burn through the night for the first time in a generation. Men in their 30s and 40s, factory foremen, delivery drivers, school teachers who once did their compulsory service and assumed that chapter of their lives was closed, receive calls they believed they would never receive. Military enlistment offices, ordinarily sleepy bureaucratic outposts, to become the busiest buildings in every regional capital, their courtyards filled before sunrise. Trains that once ran passengers and freight now run almost exclusively toward the western frontier, hauling armor under tops that fool no one paying attention. Fighter regiments rotate to forward airfields. Naval assets in the north and in the Black Sea shift posture, some venturing farther from port than they have in years, others withdrawing to harder, better defended anchorages. For most citizens deep in the interior, none of this is visible directly. What they feel instead is absence. A nephew who stops answering messages, a co-worker whose desk is suddenly empty, a certain kind of silence that used to belong only to funerals. For ordinary Russians, the war does not look like a battlefield. It looks like currency collapsing against Western benchmarks by the hour. It looks like queues outside grocery stores that had never needed queues before, forming not from panic alone but from a learned, generational instinct that shortages are coming and the shelves will not restock on anyone's schedule. It looks like young men quietly researching which borders remain open and which do not, and older relatives urging them, in low voices, to wait and see. Sanctions long in place tighten further, and new ones arrive within hours, aimed at what remains of the financial architecture still connecting the country to the outside world. Energy exports, the economy's oldest lifeline, are rerouted, discounted, and diverted toward buyers less squeamish about optics. Domestic industry, already reshaped by years of isolation, pivots harder toward self-sufficiency, with mixed and uneven results. Store shelves in Moscow and St. Petersburg remain comparatively full. In smaller cities, the strain shows faster and raw. Social media, heavily filtered but never fully sealed, becomes its own quiet battlefield. Rumors outrun verified information by hours, sometimes days. State channels insist all is proceeding according to plan. Independent voices, operating from exile or from careful anonymity inside the country, tell a different story. and ordinary citizens are left to triangulate the truth from fragments, the way people always have in moments like this. Abroad, the response is neither unified nor simple. NATO convenes emergency sessions in Brussels, passing what collective defense actually requires when tested rather than merely rehearsed. Some member states respond with immediate resolve. Others hesitate, citing energy dependencies built over decades and populations weary of compounding crises. Neighboring states caught geographically between larger powers scrambled to secure their own borders and their own supply lines, unwilling to be pulled fully into an orbit they never chose. Diplomats on every side work back channels around the clock, hunting for any off-ramp before miscalculation compounds, miscalculation beyond recall. This is the part no planner wants to imagine aloud, and yet every serious planner has already modeled it. Cyber rats probe power grids and financial clearinghouses on both sides. Communications blackout in contested border regions for hours, then days. In the most extreme, least spoken projections, the ones intelligence services hope never leave a classified drawing board, the question of nuclear signaling enters the discussion, not as an inevitability, but as a possibility too serious to dismiss outright. Analysts on every side describe a world where deterrence still, for now, holds where the old grim guarantee of mutually assured destruction still functions as it has for 80 years, but where the margin for error has never felt thinner. And yet here is the truth that gets lost in every worst-case scenario. None of this has happened. Not the 3:14 a.m. call, not the conscription notices, not the empty shelves in provincial towns. It remains for now a possibility rather than a prophecy. History has walked to the edge of this particular cliff before in 1962, in 1983. In rooms most people alive today never learned the names of and stepped back each time, not because catastrophe became impossible, but because enough people in enough rooms chose caution over escalation when it mattered most. The question this scenario leaves behind is not whether it will happen. It is simpler and harder to sit with. If it did, would the country be ready? Would its people? Would its families, scattered from Kaliningrad to Vladivostok, forgive the choices made in these first 72 hours, or spend generations reckoning with them the way their grandparents still reckon with the wars that came before? That is a question worth asking long before any phone ever rings.